Welcome to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer, professor in the Department of Sociology at Western Michigan University, and I serve as the host of our program. And joining me for this edition of Critical Issues are our two regular commentators. On my right is Regena Nelson, who's in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Educational Studies at Western Michigan University. And over there on that side is Don Cooney. Don is a professor in the School of Social Work at Western, and he's also a Kalamazoo City Commissioner. And we have a very, very special guest today on the program. Someone who's always here when we tape, but he's usually back there behind the glass in the room spinning the dials. And this is Daniel Smith. Daniel is, I guess I've given you the title, producer, director of Critical Issues. I don't know if that's ever been formally conferred upon you, but that's exactly the role that you play. And again, the most critical role. And of course, Larry Mahana has been left alone back there in the control room today.
Poor Larry.
But he's doing a great job. But we wanted to bring Daniel out on this side of the camera for this particular show, because Daniel has written a very important play. It's called Slipping, and it deals with labor unions and issues related to labor unions. And so we thought, well, we'll bring Daniel out to talk about the play and the process of writing the play, and that will be a way for us to also move in and talk about some other labor issues. But Daniel, you wanted to start, first of all, by talking about another very important contemporary issue. So why don't you go ahead? In your one of the other hats that Daniel wears is that he is involved with Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War. Mm-hmm. And KNOW has been very active dealing with the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which was the subject of our last show. But Daniel, go ahead and talk about what KNOW is doing.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, as the tragedy goes on and the killing continues in Gaza, and I just wanted to ask people to please join KNOW in a Vigil for Peace at the Federal Building every Sunday from 11:30 until 1, and for justice in Palestine. And then other things you can do is go to the kzoo4peace.org website. That's kzoo4peace.org. And if you go there, you'll see we have a petition calling for a ceasefire to our senators and to our congressmen. And also there's an opportunity there for fundraising for a victim of bombing who had roots in Kalamazoo and is back in the U.S. now with their family. So you can donate to that. And please contact your Congress people about a ceasefire now. We must have it now. And then also we're working on our city and commission and Portage City Commission, Kalamazoo City Commission, Council, and the county to get resolutions passed for a ceasefire. So please join us in one of those efforts. I just wanted to mention that, especially because today we got the sad news that the ceasefire has ended, the pause in fighting and the bombing has stopped. So we need to be more active than ever on that. So
and the pause was successful in a number of ways, because it led to the release of a large number of hostages on both sides. Let's call them what they are. They were hostages on both sides, and they were released, many of them. And the bombing stopped, which allowed humanitarian aid and assistance to go into Gaza to take care of the humanitarian crisis, which was unfolding there. And and the ceasefire, or the stop in the hostilities, was extended 3 or 4 different times over the last couple of weeks, which led a lot of people to have some hope. Hey, maybe this can evolve into a permanent, but there's an enormous political pressure on the current Israeli government. Netanyahu, one of his partner factions, says, but if you do that, we'll withdrawing from the government. That would trigger a call for elections, and Netanyahu definitely wants to avoid elections at this particular point.
Yeah. Right.
So very messy situation, but KNOW Aspen doing some great work, and of course the advocacy for, let's stop the fighting. I mean, this is a pretty basic kind of thing.
Right.
Let's have a ceasefire. Let's stop the fighting. Let's try to work towards some kind of peaceful,
political solution.
diplomatic, political solution.
There's no military solution.
There's no military solution. It's going to have to happen at some point.
Yeah.
Why should more people have to die before we get to the point where we do what we need to do, right? What they need to do. Okay.
Yeah.
So just one other thing. The demonstration's 11:30 on Sunday, and we should tell people where the federal building is. Some people might not know that.
Good point. Yeah, it's at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Park, downtown.
Good. Thanks, Dan.
The old post office for some people.
Yeah.
Right.
In Collinsville.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Thanks, Don. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about slipping, and maybe you can give us a little bit of your background, which I didn't mention. I just gave some of your current activities, but I didn't give much about your background and how you came to write this very important play.
Well, in the past, for many years ago, I was a union steward in a steel mill. I worked in a steel mill for 12 years, and eventually I became a steward in the United Steelworkers Union. And I was fired twice for union activity, so I know kind of a little bit of what happened in the play. But I got my job back once because of the efforts of the union, and the other time because of the National Labor Relations Board. I went in front of them, and they ordered the company to give my job back. So, it's from that experience, and then just observation of what's going on, just realizing we really need to revitalize the union movement in the country. It's pitiful, the percentage of workers that are unionized. Especially compared to other countries. You look at the benefits, like for example, Scandinavian countries have all these healthcare and free education and so forth. And I noticed I had to go to Sweden in my job with computers for the Upjohn company back then. And I noticed even the people who were at my level, the professional people, they were all in the union. It was like 85% of the people in Sweden were in unions at that time. So, that has a lot to do as, providing strength and backup to all the progressive movements to have a strong union movement. So
unions can become a very important political force, right? And they have played that role, and they've played that role in the past in the United States. But after 1980, after the election of Ronald Reagan and the Reagan era, which not just spanning the term of Ronald Reagan's presidency, but the whole era that followed, we saw a drastic decline in unionization, and a drastic decline in the power of unions and their ability to affect any kind of domestic legislation. So we're seeing a bit of a revitalization of that right now. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about the play. Take us through the plot and how you got it staged and all of that.
Just to say a little bit about my parents, my mother was a stickler for grammar, so I was not. So that helped a lot in writing the play. Spelling and grammar. I could never say "Where's the keys?" because she said, "No, it's where are the keys?" For example. And both my parents had a progressive bent, for their times. They were proud of their kids, and didn't want them to go to Vietnam, and proud when we became kind of anti-war activists and worked against the draft and so forth. So kind of had that background. But so I wrote this full-length play. Actually, it was my first full-length play, and I wrote it for a contest. I didn't win the contest, but I came out with a play, and I wanted it to have a message, because I think what's the use of going to all this effort if the play is kind of like a Hallmark, not not to say anything about Hallmark movies, but I wanted to have something that people could come away with like they learned something, and so I wanted to do that, but I didn't want it to be boring, and I wanted to definitely have the characters be something people could identify with. So I wanted to make the audience laugh. I wanted to make the audience cry. So I wanted to transport them so they felt like they were transported to another place. And that's the only thing, I mean, that's something that only live theater, I think, can really do. And it does it so well. And so I wrote the play and kind of had an idea. I wanted it to be something about unions. And then actually, one of the requirements of this particular contest was that it was about young people mostly, so they could use college students. So I thought of college students that I knew. You know, it's like, I know this person. He could kind of like play this part, and this person. So the characters are like one of them is kind of a freewheeling artist type, and one is more serious, and one is a student who has a huge student debt. So that comes out through the play, and then of course I had to throw a foreman in there, and then there's some strong women in there that really were able to pull the effort together. So I was really happy with the way it came together and the way their individual lives kind of intertwined as the play went on.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted it to be an instructional play, but not that the people would be two-dimensional, and entertaining. And I wanted also to be correct in terms of when it does reference labor law and the steps you have to go through to form a union. I wanted people to watch that and say, oh, so that's what I need to do, So I actually had it written as been performed, and then I thought, my cousin is a labor lawyer. I should probably ask him to read it after it's all done. So fortunately, he read it and he said, yeah, it's fine, it's good. Yeah, it's close enough. Close enough. He would have done a little bit different, but yeah, no, that's close enough to what's actually labor law. So that was good. And I wanted to put in, people's lives, everyday people's lives are just not captured in movies very much, really. Movies, theater, that much, really, in terms of working class people. So just the kind of humiliations you have to go through. And for example, getting a red mark. I mean, a lot of people don't know that. Many places you work, there's a system where you get like demerits. If you get so many demerits, you get fired, and without a union, you have no way to fight it. So
that happened to me in first grade.
Yeah, and then in the play, for example, the main character looks at his phone and gets a mark. So, and that actually happened to my brother-in-law. He looked at his phone, and he got a demerit. He's a forklift driver, and he was waiting for a load or something. He looked at his phone, got a demerit or red mark or whatever they call it on your record. So yeah, you get so many, and so it's kind of humiliating,
Yes.
not being treated as a person. The other thing that is really humiliating is no respect for your life outside of work. So you show up for work, you work 8 hours, and they say, sorry, you have to stay. Well, I gotta get my kids from school. No, you have to stay. Well, if you leave, you lose your job, or you get a demerit, And that's so common if you talk, I was talked to the cereal workers, Kellogg's, that were on strike, and so many of them, not only working 7 days a week, but not necessarily being assured that when they go into work, they're not going to have to work 16 hours instead of 8, And then the other thing that the play touches on is injuries. It's so common. It's like a battleground. I mean, when I worked at the steel mill, every single year for 12 years that I was there, someone died.
Wow.
As an accident.
Wow.
I mean, just horrible accidents. I mean, being crushed by machinery, being run over by these huge machineries, or falling into a hot ingot, something like that. So, not to mention the type of health issues that people develop, from breathing fumes and heart attacks and lung disease and all that. So, just health and the play touches on that somewhat, just to let people know, there's something that happens. And then of course sexual harassment, so commonplace on the workplace. But the other thing that I think is interesting that a lot of people don't realize is that maybe if you don't work in a factory, is the pride that you have in your work. Just being able to show up, and pride that you can do this job. And it's kind of a contradiction, because you don't get necessarily credit, you don't get the benefits, you're not reaping the profits so much. You get an hourly wage, but there's the pride in showing up every day and running this machinery, and it doesn't break down. You did it. You created something. And you go home, with pride when you get your paycheck. So I think when you lose your job, that's touched on how devastating it is, not just financially, but to your whole self-esteem. Yeah. Especially if you have several years in a place or whatever, and the reason you get fired is just it's just BS. But you don't have a union, so you can't fight it very easily. So,
Powerlessness. Yeah.
So the lack of power. So that's what I wanted to touch on, and how hopefully people will realize. I guess my dream would be that the UAW sees this play and say, "Wow, this is great." When we go down to organize the Toyota workers in Alabama or whatever, we'll rent the local high school, put this play on, invite all the workers.
There you go.
Say, this is why you got to sign the card to join the union. So,
Exactly.
I don't know if they're going to be listening to this, but if they are, actually, I do. Before I go any further, I did want to mention, give thanks to Mary Roscoe, who just did an amazing job as the director and producer. It wasn't an easy play to produce, especially there in the Open House Theater Company, which is in Unitarian Universalist Church in South Portage.
Your church.
And she made this space into a theater. It was really awesome how she did it. There's no curtain there, so she couldn't close the curtain, change the scene, open the curtain, have a new scene, like traditional theaters. So she had basically 3 stages, and then the characters went to each stage, and if that was where the action was happening, they would turn the lamp on. And so look there, that's where the action is happening. So she came up really ingenious. Yeah, Mary, fantastic, and working with a really good cast that just did an amazing job. Maybe I should give their names: Tracy McFadden, Lucas Campbell, Ryan Smith, Lauren McMullen, Lisa Marie Parker, Steve Tasco, Barbara Fetzer, and David Senical. They all did a great job, and some of those people, first time ever on stage.
Really?
Wow.
First time.
Wow.
And they got it. And, of course, right before the play was set to go on, Mary Roscoe, the director, came down with COVID. So she couldn't even be there. And like I said, the cast said, hold my beer, we got this. And they put it on. They put it on. They did great. They did
Wow.
good. So really appreciate them and all the work they did. You know, some of the lines, one particular was like a page and a half where a woman is doing the kind of a soliloquy talking about her life. She's talking to her mother who's passed away, and just that she memorized that, I felt sorry.
Wow.
I was like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have written that so long for her.
Yeah.
So many lines she has to
Put a little pressure on the actor.
Yeah, she did it. She did it. So
Wow.
that was good.
Well, I was right. You know, we were very impressed the night we were there to watch the performance.
Wow.
We thought
Great.
They did a great job
Great.
also.
Good.
Yeah, same here. So my parents worked in a factory
Okay.
and they were part of a union. And so just watching those relationships, that was so true to life because all of their friends from work were really like family. And then at the point, when the union, they fought a lot. I used to hear this a lot coming up. But the plant ultimately closed and like, it just didn't work out. Like, we're not going to be able to meet the demands of the union, and this is not going to work out. We're closing the plant in Chicago, and we'll move operations elsewhere, and it was Oscar Mayer. So that's like the other side of the story. And it's like you said, when that happened, just to see the grief
Right.
of everybody who worked in that factory along with my family, it was a very hard time because that's all we knew. Our whole lives were about that work. And like you said, the pride in the products. So when we would go to the store, my dad could say, like these Lunchables by Oscar Mayer, I worked on that.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was
Great.
so
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that story to life because it is the reality of so many people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Wow. That little piece by Michael, when he summarized what has to be done to start a union, I thought, wow, I didn't even know all those steps, man. I thought I knew all that, but every step was in there. You got it in a very short piece there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted it to be a union pamphlet without people realizing that's what it was, I guess. But yeah, I think I like what you brought about family, and the people you work with end up being like family because the relationships that form, the strong bond of friendship, it just that's a whole story, kind of like another character, how all the friendship itself is so strong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Bill, that used to direct our program.
Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien, yeah. I mean, he worked at a paper mill. And, you know, he had that loyalty to his people, really strong union guy. Yeah, you could just see, and his pride in being a member of that whole group, yeah. But again, they closed too. And, wow, yeah.
It's interesting. Marx wrote about alienation in the workplace, and you know it involved a number of things, but it involved being separated from the product, right?
Yep.
Because you work on that product, but it's not that you don't control that product. It's not like you're a craftsman who's created a piece of furniture and then that is yours to do whatever you want with, to sell or to utilize for yourself, but you're separated from the product. You're separated from the process of work because you don't have any control over the pace, what's happening, especially assembly line work. Mark said workers were often separated from each other in the process, kept separated and given the pace of the work and everything, and then eventually separated from themselves. But listening to you talk about the play, and of course talking about your parents, that workers are able to overcome quite a bit of that alienation that Marx correctly analyzed, I think. I mean, I think those things are really happening in the workplace. But it's I think, a testament to the power of humans to be able to, in that context, still overcome those kind of alienating structural forces. And you captured that, I think, very well in the play.
Yeah, thanks, yeah. And also I want to mention the sheet metal workers, Local 7, made a generous donation to enable the play to be put on.
Oh, really? So
So
that's
thanks
great.
to them. Yeah, I should give them a shout out. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, the other thing that you kept emphasizing towards the end, we're doing something bigger than ourselves. And this is something that it has significance because we speak against the system. We're together in it, and I thought that was great that you put that in there like that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Glad that
So it's been staged this one time.
yeah.
Any potential for it being staged again? You know, or maybe we need to contact Sean Fain from the UAW and say, hey,
right.
Somebody
as you head
from
off.
UAW.
Right.
I mean, I really think that I'm not joking. I think Sean Fain should be alerted that this wonderful play has been written, and it could be an important vehicle, perhaps, for him in his organizing
Yeah.
efforts, because the UAW is going after all those
Right.
non-unionized auto plant
Yeah.
stuff. You know, Toyota and all the rest of the foreign auto manufacturers who still are not unionized.
So I would think the local contact, Dave Pulaski, who was a UAW guy and still is, and he would have the contacts. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. I'll contact Dave. And but I put a few feelers out, but I haven't gotten anything back.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But it is timely. It's
Yeah.
very timely, and
Yeah.
especially as you're talking about, they're trying to expand to the other auto manufacturers who aren't unionized. Yeah.
And I think one of the things we want to talk about here in just a few minutes is that there is a really important revitalization of the labor movement that seems to be underway.
Yes.
And so even more timely, this
Right.
important play. Yeah.
Right. It was written about 5 years ago, and this kind of life has imitated art.
Do either of you have any final questions for Daniel about the writing process, or?
No, congratulations. It's
Yeah.
really
Well, thank
did a
you.
wonderful job, Dan.
Thank you.
Very great job.
Yeah. And we don't have to stop talking about it, but let's move on and talk
Sure.
about what's happening
Implications.
with the
yeah.
revitalization
Yeah,
of
that's
the
good.
labor movement. And you know, I think the place to start, of course, is with this very successful UAW strike. I mean, this was an amazing strike in so many different ways that
Wow, yeah.
that just took place. It lasted for 40 days. Sean Fain, who is the president of the UAW, did, I thought, just an absolutely amazing job of getting this organized and pulling it off. There were all kinds of people who were telling him, you can't do this, this won't work, you're going to fall flat in your face. But boy, they did it. And the title, or they characterize it as the stand-up strike, which was a reference, of course, to the sit-down strikes that took place back in the 30s when the UAW was first really getting organized, really first the sit-down strikes that took place in Flint.
Transformed the whole movement.
Which were so important in union history, labor history. So this was not a sit-down strike, but a stand-up, because we're standing up to the powerful corporate interests represented by the big three automakers. And they won. They won. They got just amazing pay raises, anywhere from 35 to 160%, depending on where you are in the whole process. Just blockbuster contracts, I think you'd have to characterize them. And the strategy was to strike all three at the same time, all three, the big three, Ford and GM and Stellantis, used to be Chrysler, to strike, because normally the strategy had been to pick one and strike that. But this time it was all three, and they were very selective in terms of, okay, not every plant is being shut down by a strike. We're going to be very selective. Okay, we're going to go with this Ford plant this time. And again, they were very, very strategic in how they made their decisions about where they were going to strike.
And they played one off against the other. When
They
one
did.
would make some kind of a positive step, they'd say, oh, we're going over here, these guys are good, we're
Yeah.
going over there, you guys didn't do that yet. So
Yeah.
that was very helpful. Yeah.
Put enormous pressure on the automakers, didn't it? That was a wonderful strategy. And the only other thing I'll say about about the strike is that it really helped. One of the major gains here was to say, or to force the auto companies to say, okay, as we move forward on electric vehicles, and as we create the electric vehicle plants and the battery plants for the electric vehicles, they were planning to keep those non-union. But they can't do that now. They were forced by the strike to agree that, yes, okay, these electric vehicle and battery plants are going to be unionized. That we, and so those are going to be union jobs.
Right.
Very, very important. And of course, this is so critical because the future of the auto industry is in electric vehicles, and so to have that now a central component part of the whole process. And one of the other things, just we in the climate change movement always talk about just transitions, right? That as we move forward and trying to decarbonize the economy, that we have to take care of workers, right? We have to make sure that, okay, just, we have to switch, we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and we have to find ways to do that, but we can't do that at the expense of workers.
Right.
In the fossil fuel industry or in the automobile industry or any industry that would be affected by that transition. And so in the transition to a renewable energy economy, we have to take care of workers as we go along, but that takes planning. And that takes some foresight.
Right.
That takes some organization. And the UAW took that as an important organizing principle with the strike. And I think they were very successful in doing that. So kudos to Sean Fain and the UAW. This was just an outstanding example of how you really stand up, as they said in their title, how you stand up to the corporations and how you successfully strategize and you advance important social justice principles as you carry out your strike.
And I think one of the very important things that they did was the way they framed the issue. They framed the issue around inequality, that this is what's happening in the country, that there's this enormous gap which keeps growing, and it's time for ordinary people to get up. And people could back that. People could know that's happening. And so I think they got a lot of sympathy and empathy from people in the general population.
They did the polling. There was a CNN poll, and it said 76% of the American people supported the UAW workers as the strike was going on.
Right.
And a Gallup poll about the same time said 67% of Americans approve of unions. Okay.
Wow.
As unions have declined, but there's still tremendously important support out there for unions. People recognize the power and importance of unions. And they haven't even seen Dan's play yet. Once they see Dan's play, that number will go even higher, right?
So I think the statistics were that in 1954 we had 35% of the country in unions, and today we have about 10% of the country in unions. So this is a comeback here, and if they can get these other automobile workers in this union, that could really spur a movement. Yeah.
150,000 UAW workers now in the big three, and if you get all of these UAW members of Toyota, Subaru,
Honda,
that's another 150,000. So they'll double their size if they if they get all these unions in. And I did go to the UAW.org site, and there's a place that directs you to, okay, if you work at Subaru, go here, click here, give us your information. And I guess thousands of people are doing that. So sounds
wonderful.
like they're really optimistic.
Yeah, and what these people in these other companies are getting now compared to what they won for their workers, that's got to say, wait a minute now, how come we're doing the same thing? What? Yeah.
And Toyota and Honda both jumped in really pretty quickly and raised wages.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Got to head this off.
We were just about to do that.
We were just going to do that. You don't need the union. You're going to get a raise.
Yeah.
That's what Sean Fain called UAW. You are welcome
Yeah.
to the non-union workers that didn't have to go on strike and got a raise.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
But the whole thing raised the issue of inequality in the country, which I think is the main issue that we're facing in this country right now. You mentioned before Reagan. I mean, that's when the great switch was. From the New Deal up until the 70s, things started to get a little shaky, but still the gap between the wealthiest and ordinary people was shrinking. But after 1980, it dramatically changed, and we've never stopped it. And the logic of the system is that it will keep getting bigger unless something dramatic happens to change it.
Yeah, and the economist Thomas Piketty.
Piketty's the guy.
I mean, he demonstrates that, he's got that curve in there that shows, I mean, my gosh, the inequality was here and then it got reduced.
Yep.
Then it started going back up again.
Yep.
And now it's back to exactly where it was in
20s.
The 20s, and
Yeah, and what he shows is that the logic of the system is that it will keep increasing. Something has to change in the system.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways it could change. Certainly unions will be an important part, but also public policy. You mentioned Sweden, and I went to a day-long workshop yesterday on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And it's so clear that what happens to a kid when they're early affects the rest of their lives. So what has to happen is a policy change that says, like, we're going to imitate these other countries that put the support for these kids from the beginning. And that's what these other countries are doing, and they have a much more equitable lifestyle, and the system advances. We all advance. So unions are a big part of it. Public policy is also a big part of it.
One thing that I like that they got from the strike was trying to do away with tiers.
Yes.
Where you're working next to somebody and they're making $17 an hour and you're making $35 or whatever dollars an hour. That was kind of clever of the companies to get that, to divide people.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
But the big why some people are getting 150% raise is because they were getting paid 150% less.
Yes.
That's right.
I thought that was great that Sean Fain fought so hard for
That's
that.
right.
That
That's
principle.
right.
I mean, a union should be one for all. So
Exactly.
Solidarity forever, right? I mean,
Exactly.
you got to have that solidarity within the ranks, and this was a way to restore it or bring it back.
Yeah.
Build on it.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how, talking about public policy and politicians, and so the two probable presidential candidates. So President Biden, as we know, went and was right on the line and expressed his support for the strikers, for the workers. Very, very clear. He stood with the workers. There was no doubt about it.
No,
he was there for them. All of his public statements expressed great support for the workers, for the union, for the strike. The other probable candidate, a man by the name of Trump, you might have heard of him, but he decided he was going to try to get in on this too, and so he came to Michigan, went to Macomb County, about the only county he might even be possibly welcomed in, and maybe among some folks, but he went in and he was claiming, this strike is going to be a disaster. He went to a non-union plant, by the way. He did not. He went to a non-union auto supply or a supplier plant, not one of the main. And he was not standing with UAW workers at all. But he went to this plant and he kind of basically was, saying this is a disaster. This strike is going to end the auto industry, and electric vehicles are going to be the death knell. And he says, why do you even have this strike? Because if you move forward with electric vehicles, you're all going to lose your jobs anyhow, because this is going to be a disaster for the auto industry. And you all should vote for me, because if you don't, it's suicidal. He actually used those terms. He said it'd be suicidal if they didn't vote for him, because only he could save the auto industry. And then of course, the results of the strike completely obliterate every single talking point that Trump tried to enumerate there. But it was so clear. Biden was with the workers.
Yeah.
He supported the strike. Trump
Yeah.
was not with the workers.
Right.
He did not support the strike. And it's pretty clear that another Trump presidency would be, a death knell for unions and for working class people.
Absolutely.
I mean, he never did anything to assist working class people.
Right.
His term that he was in office gave massive tax cuts to the wealthy and to corporations, basically did nothing to assist the working class, got us into trade wars that actually raised prices, helped to fuel some of the inflation that came later, did nothing to address the COVID crisis, which impacted working people so dramatically because they had to stay at their jobs and couldn't stay home and work. And so, again, it would be a total disaster for working class people if this man gets back into office.
Yeah.
Although he still has a lot of political support among the white working class. And again, there are reasons for that we could talk about at some point down the line. But what I hope people who are paying attention saw here was one presidential candidate standing up for the working class and helping assist them in making important gains, and another who was grandstanding and making all kinds of false claims, as he usually does, and did nothing to assist them before and will do nothing to assist them in the future. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's not just the working class, it's also the middle class with stagnant wages when cost of living is going up. So they're living paycheck to paycheck, and then when something happens in your life that's a disaster, you just fall. You just fall. And so we're seeing it in society now with the housing crisis, the healthcare crisis. All these things are normal things that happen to all of us, but without a safety net in the system. So who's going to provide that? Who's going to provide the funding for that? The policies that will help people.
Right.
It's like you said, it's the two things together. We got to increase the wages so people can have a living wage. And then when things happen, because they always do, we have to have a system that supports people.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had that during COVID.
Yeah.
We had that.
Yeah, we showed how
we
this
showed
works.
how it could work.
Exactly.
Most definitely with the mother's pension stuff.
Yep.
That the mother's aid there. We showed that we dropped the poverty rate in half for children, and so we know how to do it.
Exactly.
It's the will. It's the will.
political will.
Political will.
And with the Inflation Reduction Act that the Biden administration passed, it also shows how you can be very smart in your investments in ways that promote jobs, promote wage increases, and yet also do things that will help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Right.
And again, I think that legislation is vastly underappreciated.
Yes. Yes.
And
definitely.
it seems odd that, if you really look at the Biden administration, I was certainly, Joe Biden was not my first choice to be president in 2020. There were other Democrats that I was hoping would get in there. But I have to confess that Biden has done much better than I thought he would do.
He has.
He's been he's been very bold, I think, in many of the legislative proposals. The Inflation Reduction Act, I thought, was just an outstanding piece of legislation at a time when there was so little in the way of climate legislation. This stands out as a shining example of what you can do. Now, there's so much more that needs to be done, but nonetheless, this is a shining example of what the federal government can do if it puts its mind to it and develops the political will. And we can, and again, this notion of a just transition, or the notion of, as we decarbonize the economy, to make sure that we also pay attention to social justice issues, which was part of the Green New Deal. When the Green New Deal was proposed, that was sort of the centerpieces of it. We've got to reduce carbon emissions, but we got to do so in a way that addresses issues of social justice.
Yeah.
And the Inflation Reduction Act, did a pretty good job of that. It could have been better, but nonetheless, for what we had in the past in terms of any legislation, this was a shining example of what we can do.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
And one of the best things that Biden did was put in pro-worker leadership in the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, so that so many rulings as these union movement comes up, like in Starbucks and so forth, they're able to side with the workers when they're treated unfairly. And you know, I hate to think of what kind of NLRB Trump would appoint.
Well, we can look at what Reagan did.
Yeah.
Reagan did the exact opposite of what you're talking about there. He put people in there that had no sympathy for labor, and we lost so much.
Yeah, luckily when I was fired, I had a good NLRB in Detroit region that sympathized with me. Actually, the way I got my job back was because the company actually, once we had it was like an informational picket line because they had cut one of the job classes. We weren't trying to start a strike. They fired us they accused us of trying to start an illegal strike. We were just trying to let people know what was going on. So there's 4 of us who was fired. The reason we got our job back was because a company spy followed us back to our cars, took our license plate numbers down to figure out who we were, and fired each of us. We got our jobs back because it's illegal for them to surveil you like that. Wow. And the NLRB said, give all these people their jobs back with back pay.
Wow.
So the NLRB can play such an important role in all this.
Yes, it certainly can. And Don, you talked earlier about you know, the notion of economic inequality, and that you know, this strike is one of the ways which we can kind of try to begin to address economic inequality. The other thing that again that it also does, and these things are obviously connected, is to challenge corporate power.
Yep.
Because why do we have that massive economic inequality?
Yes.
We have it because of the corporate capitalist system that's in place and the power that corporations have, the power that corporations have over the political system. The Citizens United ruling by the Supreme Court a number of years ago allows corporations to play an enormously important role in the political process because they can have so much money to generate for campaign contributions. So this corporate power is very well entrenched, and of course it operates to the detriment of the middle class, the working class. And this was one way to begin to fight back against that corporate power, which is one way in which we then begin to address the question of economic inequality.
Yeah, right. It's that whole thing there, because it's people that are making the rules, the elected officials. And who are those elected officials and how did they get there? And that's how they got there. Right. And the only thing that's going to change that is a mass movement, getting more and more people involved in demanding change. And that's the challenge. And I think the strike did a lot to help us move in that direction.
Shawn Fain was actually wearing a T-shirt that said, "Eat the rich." And I thought, oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea. You know, right in the middle of the strike, I'm not sure that's really...
that's not the message.
But nonetheless, I mean, it just showed that this guy's fearless.
That's the issue.
This guy's
That's
fearless.
the issue.
He's, you know, hey, the problem is corporate power. It's the wealthy who are dominating our society, who are dominating our political process, and who's getting hurt? We're getting hurt. We, the workers, we, the working class, we, the middle class, we're the ones that are suffering because of this disproportionate amount of corporate power that affects our political process. So he was right out front with that. I mean, he didn't shy away from confronting that issue. I probably wouldn't have worn that T-shirt myself, but nonetheless, he was very bold, I think. It worked.
Another thing about his boldness, it's a 5-year contract. He made sure it expired April 28th, right on the eve of May Day.
Oh.
So he invited all the other unions to make their next contract expire April 28th, 2028. And he says we'll have a general strike. I mean, he called for a 4-day work week, knowing that it wasn't really likely that just he against the American auto companies would be able to get a 4-day work week. But possibly, if you know more and more unions join in, it's a possibility.
Right. I didn't realize that. That's very strategic. Yeah. Wow.
Talking about corporate power, I just wanted to highlight there's a new book that's just come out written by Joan Claybrook, and who used to, what was her position at the National?
Well, she was transportation, wasn't she? Transportation, Secretary of Transportation.
Anyway, Ralph Nader, advocate and supporter, and Robert Weissman, who's an economist, and they've written a book titled "The Corporate Sabotage of America's Future and What We Can Do About It." And it's published by Public Citizen and Essential Books. It's available. When I first clicked on it, you can actually download a copy of it, free.
Wow.
And so if people want to go check this out, "The Corporate Sabotage of America's Future and What We Can Do About It." And again, they simply point out that corporate sabotage is at the heart of our nation's dysfunction in all kinds of ways, and they thoroughly document all the ways in which corporate power is used to thwart important progressive policies that would help working class and middle class people.
Wow.
And the stranglehold that corporate power has over our government, and ways we can try to address that and fight back against that. So.
Great, great. I'm gonna look for that. Yeah. Wow.
Can I talk a little bit about the PRO Act?
Yes,
Which is
yes.
It's the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, and it's been on the docket to try to get passed. It actually passed the House when we had a Democratic House, and it failed in the Senate because you needed 60 votes because of this filibuster. So, but hopefully we can get around the filibuster somehow, or get 60 good senators in there. But what it does, because of the impunity, one reason we don't have a higher rate of unionization is millions of people want to join the unions, but there's so many hurdles they have to go through. One of them is the impunity of the companies. Firing people that they suspect of union activity, for example, and without any penalties. No civil penalties. I mean, you can get your job back eventually, maybe, but what are you going to do? And maybe it takes a year to go through the process. So, a lot of people naturally are afraid to do that. So what would it do would the NLRB could do a court order to give you your job back if you're fired, and they find out that it was illegal. You get your back pay is 3 times your wages if you get your job back. Then there's penalties for violating against the companies. $50,000 for the first violation, $10,000 a day for failure to comply, then $100,000 for any further violations, and it makes illegal the coercive captive audience meetings, where the boss takes you into this little room. You have to watch this video about how horrible unions are, and with no rebuttal from the union at all. So it gets rid of those. So requires that you can't get rid of can't do captive audience, and as well making elections a lot easier, making the time period between when you vote for a union and when you get your first contract, that has to be within a reasonable time period. So a lot of good stuff in that.
Yeah.
If that gets passed, it'll really help. Yeah.
Any final thoughts about Daniel's wonderful play or the union issue?
Well, I just think it was very timely. But you wrote it before, but you put it out there right at the right time, Dan. I think that's great. Yeah, that you did that. I think, as you said before, that theater, movies is a great way to raise consciousness. I don't know if people have seen on Netflix now, Rustin. It's a new movie out about Bayard Rustin, and it really does a tremendous job about raising the consciousness about the civil rights movement and about gay and lesbian people and their struggles, in a way that you could study it and read it, but somebody said one time that if you want to know what love is, you can look up in a dictionary, or you could go see Romeo and Juliet. And I think that's what you did in the play. You made it so that, hey, this is what this is all about.
And back in the New Deal, that was clearly recognized. There was support.
Absolutely. They would hire those folks.
People were the federal government was supporting people to produce important cultural products, right? That could be important to the community.
I think one of the things, Dan, was that we could identify with the people in your play. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles that we have right now. We went from a period when we were feeling, from the New Deal through the 60s up until the 80s, or in the mid 70s, where we felt we were all in this together. But since then, it's all about us individually trying to make it on our own. And it's trying to bring us together. And I think that you showed how ordinary people could come together and make a difference. And I think that that sense of solidarity has to come back in this country.
Yeah. And I think too, it's also timely because we think about unions are just, factory workers. I think that's the narrative that's out there. But like you said, in other countries where it's all across all levels. And now that we're looking at this changing landscape with artificial intelligence and the Hollywood writers and the strikers and their intellectual property, this will affect all of us. And so raising awareness of how we come together to do this, your play was very helpful in putting that out there.
Yeah, really good.
Well, I'm getting the signal that our time is up for today. Dan, thanks so much. It was great to get you
Thanks for having
from
me.
this side of the glass
me.
and going out here. And thank you so much for writing the play. And I hope we get it to Sean Fain and promote it
Come on, John. Let's go.
to other workers. So thanks to Don and Regina for joining us again. And we thank you for coming to see us on Critical Issues. We hope you come back. Critical Issues, Alternative Views.